That Friday night, I was just finishing dinner alone, as usual, when the doorbell rang. I opened it, and there they were, my parents, my younger sister Courtney, her husband Blake, and 3 massive suitcases they dragged straight into my foyer like they already owned the place. They didn't ask, didn't even text or call. They just walked in, parked their bags, and took a seat at my dining table. I didn't say anything as they settled in, chatting casually like it was just another normal visit. Blake, as usual, took control, pouring himself a glass of a good Cabernet I had been saving for myself and launching into property talk, like he owned the entire coast. Halfway through the meal, Courtney looked up, totally casual, and said, "Tomorrow morning I want breakfast on the table at exactly 5 a.m. Blake gets up early and likes everything done his way. As the host, it's your responsibility, right?" My parents smiled and nodded as though she just asked for extra ketchup. My jaw tightened, but I just smiled back. "Sure, no problem," I said, excusing myself as I walked into the kitchen. I stood there for a moment, staring at the clock ticking on the wall. 5 a.m. Fine. I set my alarm for 4, picked up my phone, and ordered the strongest morning, cleanest tea I could find. With same-day delivery, they wanted breakfast at 5. I was going to give them a wake-up call they would never forget. The next morning, I was already wide awake before my alarm even went off. The house was quiet, save for the low hum of the fridge and the distant crash of waves against the shore. I slipped out of bed, threw on a robe, and padded bare the staircase to the kitchen. It was still dark outside, and the quiet of the house felt strange after the chaos of the previous evening. I started pulling everything out like I was running our brunch service. Fresh sourdough from the bakery down the road went into the toaster with garlic butter. Eggs went into the pan for soft, boiled exactly 6 minutes. Strawberries, blueberries, and mango slices went onto a white platter. Orange juice was freshly squeezed, and the good Colombian coffee beans were ground fresh. I even set the table with white linen napkins folded like restaurant style, silverware lined up just so. A little extra touch for their special morning. Then I opened the small brown package that had arrived the afternoon, the detox tea. Deep cleans formula. The label warned in tiny print not to exceed 1 bag per day. I dumped 6 bags into the largest teapot I had and poured in water over them, letting it steep until the water turned nearly black. The smell was sharp, almost medicinal, but I told myself it was just strong herbs, nothing more. By 5 a.m., everything was ready. The table looked perfect. At exactly 5 o'clock, I heard the first footsteps thundering down the stairs. Blake was first, his hair still wet from the shower, wearing workout shorts like he owned the gym membership to my life. Courtney followed in silk pajamas, yawning dramatically. My parents shuffled in last, Mom clutching her robe, Dad already complaining that the air conditioning was too cold. Blake surveyed the spread and clapped once. "Now that's what I call service," he said. "Look at this, babe. Your sister went all out." Courtney slid into the chair at the head of the table, the one I usually sat in, and poured herself a huge mug of the detox tea without even asking what it was. "Finally, someone around here understands hospitality," she said, taking a long sip. "This tastes healthy." My parents both reached for the teapot, not asking any questions, and poured themselves cups as well. Dad joked, "If it keeps me regular at my age, sign me up." I just stood by the island, arms folded, watching them drink. It was just another Saturday morning. I said nothing, just smiled and cleared a few crumbs from the table. The clock ticked on, and I waited. I stood by the counter, watching as the family debarred rest I'd carefully prepared. The sounds of chewing and idle chatter filled the air, but inside, I felt a simmering anger that I didn't know how to express. They were so comfortable in my space, so sure of themselves. It was like they believed this was normal, like I existed to serve them. Blake kept talking about property values, like he was some kind of expert. He mentioned the houses down the coast, how they were worth of 8 figures now. His voice was smooth, almost rehearsed, and he kept his eyes on my father as he spoke, like he was trying to impress him. My father, as usual, looked up to Blake. Always had. Courtney, sitting at the head of the table, leaned over to Blake, her hand resting on his shoulder. "We were thinking, sis," she said. "You're rattling around in all this space by yourself. Why not carve off the north acre, put in a spec house, and let Blake handle the sale? The commission alone would set Mom and Dad up for years. I set my fork down, feeling a knot form in my stomach. I couldn't believe it. They were asking me to break up my property, to sell a piece of the life I'd built after my divorce. They were asking me to give up the last thing that was truly mine. Blake smiled like he was doing me a favor. "It's not a bad idea, really," he said, his voice casual. "Keep the main house, keep your privacy, and still walk away with 7 figures after fees. Everybody wins." Courtney's hand slid across the table, reaching for mine. "Con Joe. You don't even use the back 2 bedrooms. We could turn one into an office for Blake. He works remotely anyway. It makes total sense for us to spend more time down here. Family should stick together." I felt my pulse quicken. "Family should stick together," I repeated, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I remembered everything I'd done for them, the money I'd sent for years, the wedding I'd paid for, the medical bills, the constant bailouts. None of it seemed to count tonight. Mom nodded eagerly. "Your father and I always said this house was too big for one person. Remember when you first bought it? We told you it was extravagant." I swallowed the memory of how hard I'd worked to buy this place, how I'd used every penny of my divorce settlement to get it. I didn't ask for anything in return, and yet, here they were, telling me it was too much, that I didn't need it. "I remember," I said quietly. "I also remember wiring you $3,200 every month for the last 10 years so you wouldn't lose your house up north. But I guess that doesn't count, does it?" Blake refilled his glass of wine, his eyes gleaming as he leaned back in his chair. "Look, John, I'm not trying to pressure you, but opportunities like this don't wait. I already have 2 cash buyers from New York circling. One phone call, and we could have letters of intent by Monday." The words hit harder than anything else they had said. It wasn't just about the money. It was the way they treated me, like I was nothing more than a convenient resource, an easy mark for their schemes. And my parents, they didn't even bat an eye. They nodded, as if this was all perfectly normal. I stood up abruptly, unable to sit there any longer. "I'll think about it," I said, knowing full well that meant no. But they wouldn't hear that. They never did. Courtney rolled her eyes. "You always say that. Then nothing changes." Blake gave her a small shake of the head, the universe-been signal to drop it. He smiled at me, all perfect teeth and practiced warmth. "No rush," he said. "We're here for the week. Plenty of time to go over numbers. A week." They had decided to stay a week without asking, without considering how I felt about any of it. As they moved to the living room, already discussing where to put the Christmas tree if they started coming every year, I excused myself and walked outside. The tide was coming in, loud and indifferent. I stood there until my feet went numb in the wet sand. The house, the family, everything was suddenly too much. 12 years ago, I had signed those divorce papers and used it of my settlement to buy this house, to buy something that nobody could ever take away from me again. But now, it felt like I was already losing it. When I finally walked back inside, the lights upstairs were off, except for the master suite they'd claimed. I could hear Courtney's muffled giggle through the walls, Blake's low voice answering. My parents' snores drifted down the hallway. I poured myself a glass of water and stared at my reflection in the dark window. And that's when it hit me, their visit wasn't temporary. They had come to stay. I woke up before the alarm even went off, the way-thing from the night before pressing on me. The house was silent, still dark outside, and I padded down the stairs in my robe, my feet cool against the tile. It was still early, too early for anyone else to be awake, but I had work to do. I started pulling everything out sorto from the bakery, fresh fruit, eggs, coffee. But the real work would come later. I opened the box that had arrived yesterday, the one with the detox tea. It wasn't just any tea. This was the strongest I could find, the kind they warned you not to use too much of. 6 bags. I emptied them all into the largest teapot I had. The scent hit me almost immediately, sharp, pungent, like something you'd use to scrub a floor. But I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about them, about how they had invaded my space and acted like I owed them something. I boiled the water, poured it over the tea bags and let it steep while it sat. I arranged everything else. The table was set just right: fresh orange juice, soft boiled eggs, a platter of sliced fruit. I even put extra effort into the napkins, folding them like something out of a fancy restaurant. By the time everything was ready, I felt a little less tense, a little more in control. At 5 on the dot, the first footsteps sounded. Blake was the first to show up, hair still damp from the shower, wearing workout shorts like he was already at the gym. He walked straight to the table without even looking at me, plopping down at the head of the table with a satisfied grunt. Then came Courtney, her pajamas silky and draped over like she was trying to make an entrance. My parents followed, half awake, still pulling their robes around them like the world owed them something. Blake clapped his hands together, smiling wide. "No, that's what I call service," he said, looking around at the spread. Courtney slid into the seat at the head of the table, the one I normally sat in. She picked up the teapot, poured herself a large cup in. "Finally," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Someone here knows how to take care of us." My parents, still half asleep, reached for the tea without a second thought. I stood at the island, arms folded, watching them. They had no idea what was coming. I said nothing, just watched them pour the tea into their mugs, laughing about how it tasted healthy. Blake refilled his cup twice. Courtney kept saying how energized she felt already. My parents were in the same boat, asking for seconds on the eggs, like everything was fine, like nothing had changed. I didn't move, just stood there waiting. My hands shook a little, but I kept my smile in place. Every perfect, too perfect. The first groan came from Blake, low and muffled. He shifted in his chair, pressing a hand to his stomach. Then he bolted upright, his face going pale. He was gone in an instant, running for the downstairs powder room. The sound of the door slamming behind him was loud enough to rattle the walls. Courtney laughed at first, calling him a drama king. But then her eyes widened, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, pushing herself away from the table. She sprinted upstairs, shouting my name like I'd done something to her on purpose. That was when my parents started to feel it, too. My mom gripped the edge of the table, her face pale. "Ron," she whispered, "I don't feel right." My dad tried to stand but wobbled back into his chair. The noise from both bathrooms was unmistakable, nonstop flushing, doors banging, groaning. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching. I didn't say anything. When Courtney finally screamed from upstairs, "What the hell did you put in that tea?" I dialed 911. My voice was calm, steady. "Wes, hi, I have 2 elderly people here experiencing stomach distress and dehydration, possible food reaction. We need paramedics." I hung up, staring at my phone. It wasn't the reaction I'd been hoping for, but it was the one they deserved. The paramedics arrived in less than 8 minutes, their sirens barring down the driveway as they pulled up. 2 of them rushed inside with a stretcher, immediately going to work on my parents. They were both curled up on the couch, sweating, their faces pale, clutching their stomachs like they had been hit by a truck. I stood back, watching it all unfold with a strange sense of detachment. The worst part was that I knew exactly what was happening. I'd made sure the tea was potent, knowing it would hit them hard. But seeing them like this, my parents, the people who raised me, did something to me. The paramedics didn't waste time. They took one look at my mom, curled over, and immediately went to work. IV fluids, vitals checked, the whole routine. They moved quickly, methodical. I could hear my dad muttering something about how cold it was and how his stomach hurt, but I wasn't paying attention anymore. Blake and Courtney didn't take long to follow the paramedics, both of them looking green. Blake managed to pull himself together long enough to bark at Courtney, but the sight of them scrambling for the door, leaving without even a second thought, only added to the irony of it all. By the time they were gone, the house was still. The ambulance had pulled away, the sound of its engine fading into the distance. I walked back inside, my mind racing. Everything felt different now. I wasn't just a passive bystander to my family's manipulation anymore. I was in control, and it felt damn good. But it wasn't yet. I stepped into the living room, where the empty chairs felt bigger, like they were waiting for me to fill them, but I wasn't going to, not anymore. I needed to know what had really been going on. That's when I saw it. The bag. Blake's leather weekender, half open on the bench at the foot of the bed. I hesitated for a second before walking over and picking up. My fingers brushed the top, and my heart skipped a beat. I could feel something in there, something important. I unzipped it. pulling out the stack of papers stuffed underneath a pile of folded shirts. Inside was a thick manila folder, its edges worn from being hammered too many times. My name was written on the tab in neat block letters, J. Caldwell, Longboat Key. My pulse jumped, suddenly racing in my throat. I opened the folder slowly, each page adding weight to my chest. Photographs of my house, taken from the street, from the water, even at night, as if someone had been watching me for months. The earliest was dated 1.5 years ago. They had been planning this for so long. I flipped to the next page, a power of attorney form, notarized, granting Blake Reed full authority to list and sell my property. My parents' signatures were at the bottom. I recognized their handwriting immediately. Mom's flowing D, Dad's cramped R. They had signed away my house without even telling me. There were more documents, a packet forming a Delaware LLC, with Blake listed as the sole manager. A spreadsheet titled, Closed Transactions Last 5 Years, 27 rows. Each one detailing the properties Blake had bought, most of them involving elderly owners who had been manipulated into selling. I felt the blood drain from my face. My name was already in row 28, status in progress. I scanned the page, my fingers trembling as I flipped through the rest of the folder. I found a printed email thread between Blake and my mother, discussing how they would get me to sign over the house once the deal was done. My stomach churned. I had been right all along. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. And they had planned to take everything I'd worked for, everything I'd fought for. I grabbed my phone, dialing the number I knew I had to call. Melissa Coleman answered on the second ring, her voice sharp but trembling. Hello. This is Joanne Caldwell, I said, my voice steady. I think we need to talk about Blake. There was a long pause on the other end, then a bitter laugh. You found the folder, didn't you? She said. I knew you would. For the next 20 minutes, Melissa told me everything. How Blake had swept into her life 6 years ago, lovebombed her, convinced her to refinance her paid off home to invest in a flip, then disappeared with the equity the moment the check cleared. She lost everything, her house, her savings, even her freedom when the bank foreclosed. She still had the police reports, the quit-claim deed with her forged signature, and the whole paper trail. I took down every detail, asking her to email me everything she had. When she mentioned another victim, an elderly woman named Margaret Ellison, I didn't hesitate. I needed to find her. Melissa emailed everything over while we were still on the phone. I pulled up the photos and documents on my computer, my hands shaking as I read through it all. I copied the files to a secure cloud drive, then sent them to my estate lawyer in Sarasota with the subject, Virgin. Possible fraud involving my parents. I added Melissa's and Margaret's contact information and asked him to loop in any law enforcement contacts he had. I made sure the files were backed up, trickered just in case. As soon as I hit send, I stood there for a moment, breathing heavily. The evidence was locked down and there was no going back now. I had everything I needed. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running out of time, that my family was going to come back and finish what they started. I needed to act, and I needed to act fast. Blake was still out there, and I knew he wouldn't stop and had gotten what he wanted. I sat at my desk and looked through the files again, my hands trembling slightly. There was no denying it now, this was far worse than I imagined. The pictures of my house, the power of attorney, the LC documents, everything pointed to one thing. Blake had been planning to steal my house for months, maybe even years, and my family had signed on without hesitation. I opened the email from Melissa once again, reading over the details she'd sent me. She had been more than willing to help me expose Blake. But I knew it wasn't just about her anymore, it was about all of us. He had done this to so many others, tricking people and giving up their homes, their savings, their futures. And my parents, they had signed off on it. They'd agreed to it. My stomach churned as I thought about what I was going to do next. There was no turning back now. I had the evidence, and I wasn't going to sit around and let them think they could take everything from me. I grabbed my phone and dialed Travis. He answered on the first ring. Joanne. His voice was rough, as if he'd been waiting for my call. What's going on? I need you to come down here, I said, my voice steady despite the rush of emotion inside me. I found everything. They've been planning to sell my house, and they've been using Blake to do it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. What? Are you serious? I'm sending you everything, I said. I need you to help me with this. We need to stop them. I could hear the sharp intake of his breath. Okay, I'll get on the next flight. I hung up and turned my attention back to the computer screen. It was time to put everything in motion. I started emailing my lawyer, sending him all the documents. The LLC formation packet, the power of attorney, the photos of my house from every angle. I made sure to include everything: the spreadsheet, the forged signatures, the text messages between my mother and Blake. I couldn't afford to leave anything out. The phone rang. It was my lawyer. Joanne, I got your emails, he said, his voice low and serious. We have a good case, but I need to make sure we're covering all the bases. Do you have access to your parents' financial records? I paused. I had a feeling where this was going. Yes, I can get them. I'm gonna need you to dig deeper. We need to know how far this goes. If Blake's been involved in other cases, we can use that to our advantage. This is bigger than just you. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I'll get it too. I'll do whatever it takes. After I hung up, I felt a surge of resolve. This wasn't just about protecting my house anymore. This was about exposing Blake for who he really was, and making sure my family couldn't get away with what they'd done. I couldn't let them get away with it. Not after everything I'd done for them. Not after what they tried to do to me. As the hours ticked by, I worked through the night. I copied every file, backed up every email, and printed everything I could. By the time the sun started to rise, I had everything in place. Travis arrived early that afternoon. I could see the shock in his eyes when he walked into the house, but I didn't have time for pleasantries. You need to see this, I said, handing him the stack of papers and photos. They've been planning this for months. Travis sat down and started flipping through the files. I could see the realization dawning on him as he went through the evidence. This is unbelievable, he muttered. They really did this. I nodded, unable to find the words. Don't worry, Travis said, looking up at me. We're gonna fix this. I'm gonna help you. Together, we spent the next few hours going over the evidence, making sure we had everything we needed. By the time we were finished, we had a plan. We would take the fight to the authorities. We would expose Blake, and we would stop him from getting away with this. The phone rang again. It was my lawyer. We're ready to move forward, he said. I've spoken with law enforcement, and we've got a team ready to investigate Blake. We'll make sure this goes all the way. For the first time in days, I felt like I had a chance, like I wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. We're going to take him down, I said, my voice full of conviction. Absolutely, my lawyer replied. This is just the beginning. I turned to Travis, who gave me a firm nod. We were in this together. And I wasn't going to stop until I'd taken everything back. The day felt like a blur. Travis and I spent the morning reviewing the plan, making sure we had every angle covered. There was no turning back now. I had a stack of evidence, and law enforcement was already involved. I knew they wouldn't stop until Blake was behind bars, but something about it all still didn't sit right with me. I kept replaying every conversation, every moment when my fame made me feel like I owed them, like my home wasn't really mine. Travis and I were sitting at the kitchen island, coffee mugs in hand, when the doorbell rang. The sound was sharp, intrusive. I looked at Travis, and he shot me a look I couldn't quite rid. We both stood up at the same time. Stay inside, I whispered. Let me handle this. I walked to the door, taking a deep breath before opening it. There, standing in the frame, was my mother, eyes swollen from crying, holding her purse tightly like it might slip away. My father stood behind her, looking smaller, weaker than Remend, and Courtney was right behind them, face blotchy, her expression a mix of rage and confusion. The moment they saw me, they stopped short, their faces frozen in uncertainty. They had no idea what to say to me now that everything was on the open. Joanne, honey, we need to talk, Mom said, her voice trembling. I folded my arms across my chest, standing in the doorway, blocking them from coming in. What is there to talk about, Mom? I said. You signed my house away. You plan to sell everything I've worked for without telling me. You don't get to walk back in here like nothing happened. Mom's face crumpled, her tears starting again. Sweetheart, it wasn't like that. We were just trying to help. We were scared. The house in Ohio, the depths. Blake said we could make things right. We never meant to hurt you. My father spoke up, his voice soft and broken. We never thought you'd find out, John. We thought we'd do this quietly, and then it would be over before you knew. We're old, honey. We needed a way out. Blake promised us a solution. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, looking at them, feeling like I was seeing them for the first time in years. These were the people who had raised me. These were the people I had sacrificed for, and they had turned on me in the worst way. You really thought I wouldn't find out? You really thought you could just sell me out like that? I asked, my voice shaking with anger. Courtney stepped forward, arms crossed tight over her chest. You don't understand, Joanne. This is bigger than you. You've always had everything. This house, your money, your freedom. I cut her off, stepping into her space. You think I don't understand? I've been supporting all of you for years. I've sent money, paid for things you couldn't afford. I've helped you in ways no one else would. And this is how you repay me. Courtney's face twisted in frustration. I'm not the one who poisoned them. I'm not the one who go to jail. I flinched, the words hitting harder than I expected. But I didn't back down. You're right. I did what I had to do. They needed to know what they'd done. You can't just throw everything away like this. Coy said, her voice rising. Blake is in jail because of you. You can't just ruin everything. You owe us an apology. You owe us money for the hospital bills. I felt a cold laugh bubble up from deep inside me. I owe you nothing. You don't get to walk back in here and demand anything. You're all lucky I didn't take more. Mom's sobs grew louder, but I didn't let them sway me. I gave you everything. And this is what I get, betrayed by my own family. Travis appeared behind me, his face hard, his jaw clenched. He didn't speak at first. He just stood there, silently backing me up. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. No, you don't get to touch me. We made a mistake, sweetheart, Dad whispered, voice cracking. We were desperate. Please, you have to understand. Understand. I repeated, my voice colder now. You thought I was the one who was desperate. You thought you could just take what I built. You use me, and you're going to pay for it. Courtney scoffed. This is insane. You're seriously doing this. You're choosing strangers over your own family. I looked at her, my eyes meeting hers for the first time since they'd arrived. No, Courtney. I'm choosing me. You all are strangers now. Mom collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Dad's face went pale, and he wouldn't look at me. Courtney screamed something about lawsuits, but it didn't matter anymore. I turned away, walking to the kitchen island, my hands shaking as I picked up my phone. I dialed the locksmith. You can start now, I said, my voice calm. Every law. Every gate, every code. I want it done by noon. The man on the other end of the line confirmed. Understood. The locksmith arrived within the hour, and as he started working, I stood in the living room, watching the clock. It was almost time. As the locksmith changed the locks, my family continued their plies, but I ignored them. The sound of the tools, the grinding of the metal, the new keys being made, it all felt like a weight lifted from my shoulders. When the last lock clicked into place, I walked to the front door, opened it wide, and stood aside. The Uber I ordered is outside. I said, my voice final. It will take you to the Sarasota airport. One-way tickets to Columbus. After that, you're on your own. Mom tried to reach her, stepped back. Courtney spat on the floor as she passed. Dad lingered for a moment, but he never looked back. When the door closed behind them, Travis and I stood there in silence. I didn't have to say anything. We both knew it was over. I looked out the window at the empty driveway, and for the first time, I felt at peace. It wasn't just the house that was mine now, it was my life. And I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me again. 6 months later, the house didn't feel like the same place anymore. I had every stick of furniture hauled out, every rug, every picture off the walls. It was as if I was starting fresh, rebuilding not just the space but my life. New line and slip-covered sofas, the color of sea foam, replaced the heavy, dark furniture that had been there when they'd arrived. Pale oak floors replaced the old carpets. The counters were white marble, catching the light like water. I ripped out the drapes, letting the sun flood in through bare windows. Along the front walk, I planted a double row of white roses that bloomed so thick the air smelled like sugar at dusk. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a sanctuary, a place I could call mine. The locks were changed the same day they left. Every door, every gate, every security code had been reset. The security system was upgraded to military grade. I had every possible precaution in place. No one was getting in without my permission. The 4,000 monthly transfers to my parents' Ohio account stopped the moment the bank cleared the final one. That was it. I had given them everything I could afford for 10 years. I didn't expect a thank you, and I certainly didn't expect gratitude. The $480,000 I had sent them over the years was gone, just like everything else they took from me. Blake's sentencing hit the news a few weeks after the trial. 18 years in federal prison, 12 for elder fornication across state lines, 4 for wire fraud, and 2 for attempted witness tampering after he tried Alyssa Coleman from county jail. The judge called it one of the most calculated patterns of predation he'd seen in 20 years on the bench. No parole before year 15. Blake was 40 now. He would be nearly 60 when the gates opened. Courtney lost everything in the civil suits that followed. The banks came for the jointly signed loans Blake had taken out in her name. Her Mercedes was repossessed in a public parking lot while she was loading groceries. The condo in St. Petersburg went into foreclosure. She now lived in a one-bedroom apartment off Dale Mabry Highway in Tampa, scanning items at a Walmart supercenter, taking the bus because her license was suspended from unpaid tickets. My parents, too, faced the fallout. They sold the little ranch house in Columbus for less than they owed. The reverse mortgage, the credit cards, and the medical bills swallowed up what little equity was left. They moved into a low-income senior apartment outside Dayton. 2 small rooms, thin walls, a hot plate instead of a stove. Social Security and food stamps kept the lights on. Mom's Christmas card never came this year. It was the first year I didn't expect one. Travis still flew down every other month, and when he did, we cooked steaks on the grill, drank too much wine, and never mentioned the people who used to sit at that table. He was the only family I had left, and he was enough. My home didn't feel heavy anymore. I took my coffee on the same Adirondack chair that faced west, watching the sunsets bleed into the Gulf. The view hadn't changed, but I had. The weight in my chest, the constant burden of guilt, gone. I still wrote letters sometimes, letters I never sent. One to Melissa, thanking her for the courage to speak first, for the strength to take down Blake before he could hurt anyone else. One to Margaret Ellison, telling her the restitution fund had finally come through, and she would be getting what she deserved. One to the detective who worked Sundays just to keep me safe. The letters never left the drawer, but writing them gave me peace. Sometimes I thought about the word, family. How strange it was that it could mean both the people who raised you and the people who try to bury you. I used to believe that blood made forgiveness mandatory. I know better now. Cutting them out wasn't cruelty. It was surgery. It was removing the cancer before it could spread any further. The roses were in full bloom again. I walked the path every morning, barefoot, letting the dew cool my feet. The house was quiet again, really quiet this time. No demands, no expectations. Just the hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of the waves. I was exactly where I belonged,